Hello and welcome. Brand new podcast. Really excited about this. Is a much needed, often discussed but understood topic. And the founder of CorVive, Mr. Jeremy Fouts, and I are going to introduce a brand new discussion point on what we feel is the integral parts to the athletic development from the ages of, say, 12 all the way through into college. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Jeremy, we're excited that you and I are going to be doing this on a regular basis, trying to help parents and student athletes navigate, from the younger ages into the high school and college years and beyond for those athletes. But thank you for joining me today, and I'm excited to get this podcast off the ground.
Absolutely, Walter. I agree with you. This is a topic that definitely needs to be discussed a lot. You and I, we've had many conversations about when those athletes go from 12 to 13, then they switch to that BB core bat. They're spending all this money on private lessons and all the things, equipment, travel tournaments, and they go to that BB core bat and they can barely get it out of the infield. And size and strength and speed is something that I have did for a lot of years with youth athletes, working with them all the way through college into the pros. And it just makes a big difference. It's physics, right? I mean, it's nothing that really can be disputed. The bigger and stronger and faster you are, the more ability you're going to have to play at the next level. And you see that every day talking to D1 coaches.
The biggest thing that we hear, from college coaches in all sports is that the word physicality and impacting, whether it's from a football perspective, lacrosse, but impacting the opposing athletes or the opposing pitcher, things of that nature. But we don't know how to go from those younger teenage years into those elite college age groups of 20 to 24, which is what the ages are now with college athletics. So let's talk about what is the process. We hear that word a lot. You got to trust the process, follow the process. But for you, in our discussions, what does that mean for families and student athletes?
Yeah, for me, it's number one, getting your nutrition dialed in, Walter. I mean, you've got to. I do a lot of speaking at schools and events, and the first question I ask parents is, how many calories is your kid burning a day? And not one of them have a clue. And then I ask the next question is how much protein are they getting a day? How much carbs are they getting a day? How much fats are they getting a day? And most of them have no clue. And most of your youth athletes right now, 170-pound youth athlete, they're burning 3,500 calories a day. They're bringing in around 3,000 calories a day. And they wonder why is my son not getting stronger? Why is he not getting bigger? Why is he not getting faster? So obviously you have to have a good strength program. You need a good speed program. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter how many times a day you're going to the gym. It doesn't matter how many times you're working with a speed trainer. If you're not getting the fuel, the right amount of fuel, number one, as far as calories in versus calories out. And if you're not getting the right macro, your protein to build muscle and to help muscles recover, the carbs for your fuel, and the fats for your testosterone and to help with your brain development, then you're not going to turn into the athlete that you want to become.
And I think it's very important for us to share, especially out of the gate. A lot of parents, as you alluded to, will spend money on hotels, all the ancillary expenses that we don't really factor in. And we're talking about, obviously travel expenses related to and from tournaments and showcases and camps. But in reality, the foundation for every young athlete, regardless of sport, should be a understanding of the role that hydration, nutrition, and most importantly, sleep have within the role of development, both physically and mentally as well.
Yeah, I have moms and dads reach out to me, email, on social media all the time. And they say, what is the number one supplement that I can get my athlete on? And they're always surprised by this, Walter, because, I own a nutrition company. So they're going to think that I'm going to recommend one of my products. And I say sleep. There was a study done by Mita Shing, and it was on 16-year-old boys, and it talked about sleep. And if they miss 9 hours of sleep more than 4 days in a row, the first thing that happens is their testosterone levels decrease by 15%. So that means a 16-year-old testosterone levels are like a 26, 27-year-old's. And then the next thing that happens, and most of our audience is baseball fans, and if the next thing that happens is their average reaction time is a quarter of a second. Missing that 9 hours of sleep 4 days in a row, that reaction time can double or triple. So yes, I talk to my athletes all the time about sleep, 9 hours a day. And then the hydration process, you've got to be hydrated, flushing the lactic acid out, making sure your body's recovering, making sure your immune system is where it needs to be. And then, of course, nutrition. Let's focus on our calories in, calories out. Let's figure our BMR, our TDEE. Let's know how many proteins we need, how much carbs we need, how much fats we need.
One of the things that parents are always saying is, well, we don't have a lot of time, between practices, games, events, and then I got to pick, his sister up at dance recital, and we just don't have a lot of time, so we're grabbing a pizza. But one of the dynamics is, as you alluded to, is that we're so focused on the equipment and the teams and the validation of, okay, we have the best. Now what do we do? But in reality, without the proper nutrition, it just takes foresight. It just takes information to understand, okay, we want to add another meal into our daily schedule, or we want to get up earlier and prepare a meal, or maybe do meal prep. Talk about why that is probably the least discussed, but most important dynamic with regard to not only athletic development, but mental development and from an academic, and social life perspective.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is Walter, in today's society, we're always looking for those things of, if I get one more hitting lesson, if I get one more pitching lesson, and they don't have the knowledge to look at the facts. The facts is, if your son gains 15 pounds, it's going to add 5 to 7 miles per hour on his velo and his exit velo. So that ball's going to fly 25 to 30 feet further, depending on the conditions. So we don't have the knowledge and the understanding, because really and truly, it's not taught very much. That's why I'm excited about this, podcast being launched with you. Is there's very little information being taught, as far as what do we need to do for our athletes. Yes, it does take time. You need to have a structure. You need to figure out what your calories need to be. You need to plan out 6 meals a day. We meal prep in our own house. I've got a senior and I've got a sophomore. It takes us about 2 hours as a family. And I call it bringing families together through nutrition. But we have all of our weekly plan. My boys both are on a 4,500 calorie diet. They know exactly how much protein. We meal prep everything. We every morning they know if they need a 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein before their lifts. They go to the refrigerator. It's written on top of the container. They heat it up. They eat it. They go to the lift. They come back, or my oldest one does because he's a senior. But they know exactly every one of their meals is written out. But that's the only way these athletes are going to get the most out of their athletic career, is having a plan, putting it to work, and they're going to see the process happen, and their strength, their size. One of the biggest misconceptions, Walter, we talked about this yesterday in our conversation. These athletes think, well, if I gain weight, then I'm going to get slower. I've been in nutrition for 27 years. I've trained some elite athletes, first round draft picks. I've never had an athlete that I have built a meal plan for or instructed them on a meal plan that has gotten slower. Every one of them has gotten faster. I got a picture of Mississippi. He's gained 25 pounds, added a lot of velo, but his 60-time laser has went from a 6'8" to a 6'6". So yes, we look at all these other reasons to spend our money and to put our attention to, the private lessons, all these different things. But the number one factor, in my opinion, is nutrition. You can work out 3 times a day, but if you're not getting the fuel, you're not going to have a progressive overload to be able to get stronger and to get faster.
One of the things that always I get pushback from parents, well, he's a fussy eater. We don't have time for meal prep, but yet you make time, as you talk about lessons and practices and tournaments. Can you talk a little bit about meal prep? What goes into meal prep? Do you do it in the, on the weekend for the week? ahead?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, both of my boys that I that live here at the house, they've got a plan, and we do it all on Sunday afternoon, and it takes us about 2 to 3 hours, and they know exactly what their macros need to be. Again, I build 100 to 150 meal plans a month for other athletes, and I give them instructions. Cook this much chicken breasts, for the week on Sunday, this much red meat, all of these different things. So we have a plan laid out. As far as the picky eaters, it depends on the age, Walter. When I've got a 12 or 13-year-old athlete, I was talking to a dad yesterday, and I said, hey, we're going to start him off with the foods he likes, but then we're going to start introducing some avocados that he says he don't like. It takes 8 exposures as far as an athlete to try something about 8 different times for them to realize, you know what, I do like this. We grow up in a society that if it's Eggos, that we heat up in the microwave, that's all we give them. If it's chicken fingers, but there comes a time where these athletes have got to understand, especially if they want to play D1 ball, they've got to understand food has been put here for fuel, not for calories I like or don't like. There comes a time where a parent's got to sit down with that athlete and say, hey, you tell me you want to go here. We're going to have to incorporate some more foods. You're going to have to try some more things. And you're going to have to recognize these foods as not just calories that you like or don't like, but these foods equal performance. I call it, when I talk to my athletes, I talk about eating with a purpose. Are we eating with a purpose, or are we just choosing calories because they taste good?
One of the things that parents and student athletes that I work with will always begin to talk about, when I start to talk to them about nutrition, well, they think it's a powder or a pill and it's instant and we're going to see results in a week and a month. Well, I don't see it. Can you talk a little bit about, the body needs to rest, recover, replenish, and it's a process. This is all about a true process that has to be executed. You can have a great plan, but if you don't execute. So talk a little bit about when you're working with the parents, what is it that you try to get them to understand? Start simple, start small, and build as you go along?
Yeah, I mean, so when I'm working with an athlete, like for example, let's say we calculate his TDEE, which number one, let me back up. You have your BMR, which is called your basal metabolic rate. That's how many calories you're burning at rest doing nothing. So let's take a 170 pound, 165 pound athlete. He's probably got around a 1700 BMR. Okay. Then we add on his activity levels and we calculate his total daily energy expenditure. So if he is doing what most athletes are doing right now, as far as lifting weights 4 or 5 days a week, it's off season in baseball, but they're still probably practicing about an hour. They're still probably doing some private hitting lessons, maybe a speed training on the weekend. They're burning around 3,400 calories a day. Okay. So I will start them off at a 500 calorie surplus. The only way they're going to gain weight is they have to be in a calorie surplus. 500 calorie surplus on top of what they're burning is going to get them on average around 1 pound of gain a week. And so we're going to need to start them off around 3,900 calories. And when I'm talking to these parents, they're like, well, man, that's a lot of food. Well, it will be hard work your first week. But not only are you going to gain that 1 pound, Walter, there's been a lot of research that says there's 2 things that can give you up to 2 inches taller than what's been given to you genetics wise. And that is the right amount of protein during puberty and the right amount of sleep. So I taught to them, yes, that 1 pound a week, 10 weeks, that's 10 pounds. That's going to make a dramatic difference. But also it could add to our linear height. Also, it's going to add to our long-term health. Our body's going to fully recover because it has the nutrition that it needs. The first thing that I have my athletes tell me the first 2 to 3 days on a meal plan, other than them saying, man, it's hard to eat all this food because they're not used to it, right? They're used to grabbing chicken fingers and mac and cheese and a little bit of pizza. But the first thing that they tell me is I'm sleeping like a baby and I feel awesome. And it's because the tank is full. Now, if an athlete, like my computer is full of them, these athletes that are seniors and they have got a lot of good skills, but they're not getting recruited because they're 160 pounds. Then I need to start them on 1,000 calorie a day surplus, which is going to get them 2 pounds of gain a week because they don't have time. And that's why my favorite ones, you and I have talked about this, is trying to get a hold of that 13, 14-year-old, trying to get that parent and that 13, 14-year-old athlete to say, hey, it's hard doing a meal plan, whether you start your senior year and you're behind the 8 ball. And it's hard whether you're 13 or 14. But if you get it now and you put it to work and you put it to practice, you're going to see so many rewards. And by the time you're a senior, you're 195, 200. And these coaches are calling you instead of you having to go out and do some research and figure out how in the world you can find a college home.
Well, this is what we're going to be talking exclusively to Jeremy about. And we're going to get into a little bit deeper with regard to when to start your process with regard to not only nutrition and strength training, but with the development within your skill set as an athlete. We're going to take a minute. We'll be right back, and we'll join and talk with Jeremy about the backside of when to start your process with regard to supplement and nutrition. And we're back, and we're really in a great conversation here. And I really want to bring into this discussion. We talk to parents an awful lot, and they're always talking about when to start, how to start, what is the proper age, is it middle school? So let's start there, Jeremy. Let's talk a little bit about supplementation. When is the best time for a family begin to introduce this to their student athlete?
Yeah, Walter, I probably cut myself out of a lot of income that could be made since I own a nutrition company. But, I have 2 boys and I've been in this space for 27 years, but I've always got to tell the truth. And I think hydration needs to be started at a young age. CorVive is about to come out with a kids hydration. We have our NSF certified for sport hydrate that, I take daily. Most of our athletes, a lot of the MLB teams, 250 high schools and colleges. But I will tell you this, when it comes to like creatine, I have athletes ask me that's 13, 14, moms and dads. And I tell them that when your athlete shows the discipline and the maturity of being able to eat the proteins, eat the carbs, eat the fats that he or she needs, that is when, and they're training hard, that's when I say creatine is an awesome product to be able to put in. They're going to see difference in their recovery. They're going to see difference in their fast twitch muscles. It's going to increase how fast your ATP reproduces, which your ATP is what gives your muscles the energy. You're going to see strength increases. That creatine is a safe, scientifically proven supplement that I would recommend any 13, 14-year-old once they got their nutrition dialed in. Now, it wouldn't hurt them, Walter, if they, started creatine before they got their nutrition dialed in. But I just want these athletes to know that no supplement, it's called supplement for a reason, right?
Right.
No
right.
supplement is going to replace you doing the right things, which is your nutrition and your training. Okay. I don't want young athletes to think, well, I can just get creatine and eat cheese pizza. I want them to say, I've got my macros figured out. Now I'm adding creatine and I'm seeing even more results. The other supplement that I'm big on with youth athletes is your hydration, of course, your hydrate, your creatine, and then the protein grass-fed whey plus collagen meal replacement, or it's not a meal replacement, a protein shake. And the reason I love that is because it's going to be very digestible in your stomach. A lot of people know, collagen is good for the ligaments, tendons, joints, muscles, but what they really don't know also, it's really good for gut health. So when I'm starting these athletes on a lot more calories, I want to make sure we have a good gut health. So that is and I only like them drinking 1 to 2 protein shakes a day, mainly in the evening, right before they go to bed. That way they can get some added calories. It's going to be very digestible, really quick. And that's really the only 3 supplements I really want young athletes to take. But yes, when they get their nutrition dialed in, they're training hard, these 3 supplements can make a huge difference to their performance.
We mentioned the word hydration, and sometimes it's an afterthought. It's a Gatorade, it's a a drink that we stop pick up the, cherry flavor, what have you, and we think, okay, hydration. And a lot of parents think, well, it's really hot today, I better get some hydration. But hydration is a daily routine. It should be a staple on a
Yeah.
daily basis, not just, oh, the weather's hot, or not just when I'm in competition. Can you talk a little bit about the older athletes, especially the elite college and professional athletes? They recognize this, but yet it's really not discussed at length or in any kind of formal capacity with regard to the value that it has for overall health, with regard to just daily lifestyle. Can you talk a little bit about hydration and what makes a good hydration product?
Yeah, so just 2% of fluid loss is you're already headed down the wrong street, and at 5% you're basically got really bad problems. And these MLB and D1 programs, I mean, they do sweat tests all the time.
Right.
And another thing, what you just mentioned, they think the summertime, everybody knows, well, we got to be hydrated. It's actually a lot of science has said that more dehydration is in the winter because we're
Right.
not just being consciously thinking of it. My elite athletes, I have every one of them drinking 2 a day. And the first thing that happens when you start getting dehydrated, it affects the mental side. We always think, well, my son or daughter didn't have a cramp today, so they might have been hydrated. No, the first thing that happens is it affects the mental side. They're missing plays. They're not thinking clearly. All of these things is starting to happen. The cramp part is just the last point of the process of their body says, you know what, you have not given me the electrolytes you need. And I believe in drinking a lot of water, but a lot of these parents, what they don't understand, just drinking tons of water flushes out the electrolytes that's in you. You have to have good electrolytes. And so for me, what I always look for in the good electrolytes with CorVive, we use 6 grams of organic sugar cane. Part of the marketing world right now is, oh, we have an electrolyte with no sugar. And then they put artificial sweeteners in and artificial dyes and all these different things. We use a 6 grams of organic sugar cane, which is not a processed sugar. You need that amount of sugar in order for the electrolytes to be brought into the cells. And then also we use magnesium, which magnesium tells the nerves to fire the muscles. You have to have the right potassium sodium ratio to give your muscles what they call potassium sodium pump. That way all of your muscles are engaged. If one muscle is not, another one tries to overcompensate, then you have a pulled muscle. Then we use zinc. We use vitamin C, good for the immune system. Our trace mineral blend is kosher salt. And that is what I think is the perfect formula. There's a lot of formulas out there that a lot of people point to that's big name companies that has thousands of milligrams of sodium. For an everyday athlete, that might be fine for an endurance athlete, but for a sports nutrition company like CorVive, our product is designed for the everyday athlete and has that right ratio of sodium content for that everyday athlete. So, that's something that I really point hard at is don't take thousands of milligrams of sodium a day as an everyday athlete. You're going to retain water. Let's look at the right formula. And that's our formula that we use here at CorVive. And it's been proven to be the best on the market right now from a sports nutrition standpoint.
Well, I can tell you factually, I was just in your neck of the woods at my youngest son Tyler's facility, and there were probably 60 to 80 athletes, and every one of them had the CorVive Hydrate, and whether they were carrying it around in a bottle or a shaker or anything like that. But they all loved the taste, and obviously, being in Texas, hydration is critical. One of the areas that you and I have talked about at length with regard to the process, it's not just for college or professional athletes. A lot of athletes, especially those that play youth sports, may get to high school, but they want to maximize that high school experience. So what I would really love for you to discuss is hydration, nutrition, supplementation. It's not just for those that are aspiring to play college or hopefully maybe possibly professional athletics, but it's for those youth athletes that aspire to be an active high school athletic experience and have that be that participation as a high school athlete. But it has to be with a nutrition and a balanced diet, as well as the role of the creatine and the hydration. Talk a little bit about that as far as the mission statement for, the process.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I love grabbing those boys when they're young, or athletes when they're young. I've got an athlete that I started with his sophomore year, last April. He went from 149 to 175 by the summertime. Never hit a home run before, hit 3 home runs. His velo went up to 82 to 88. And it's just like you said, even if they don't want to play in college, or don't know if they don't want to play in college or pros, it gives them that experience to compete at that high level and have some memories that's going to last them forever. So for me, it's always like, how can I grab that youth athlete to get them to understand, and the parents, that nutrition is what's going to make the biggest difference in your life. And not only in athletics though, Walter, it's habits that will carry the rest of their life through. It's going to help them in college. It's going to, and even if they're not playing athletics in college, it's going to help with their academics. It's going to help with their discipline. I've got a parent that says, well, how much do you have to do with your athletes that you work with? It's pretty simple. They weigh every morning and they put it in their notes. At the end of 7 days, they send me what it is, that way I can adjust their macros or see if we need to adjust their calories. And those little bitty disciplines, the athletes that I've worked with long term, the ones that has been, phenomenal D1 athletes, Walter, they'll tell you, if you call them today, they'll say, what I learned from Jeremy has been phenomenal on the macros, the calories, what to eat, when to eat it, right before I go on the game. If I'm a pitcher, how to have that tortilla with honey to give me good natural sugars and good natural carbs where I have plenty of fuel. But all of them will tell you what has been the best thing is him teaching me these daily disciplines that has got my mental mindset known, that if I tell myself I'm going to put some notes down of how much I weigh, if I tell myself I'm going to eat this every day, if I tell myself I'm going to report to my sports advisor or my sports, whoever it is he's working with, then I create this confidence that I made a promise to myself and I kept that promise. So I think the nutrition side is phenomenal, right? You see differences in the velocity off the bat, the velo across the diamond, all these things. But Walter, what's really not talked about, and what I really love about this process, is the person you come up here, because you made a promise to yourself you're going to stay away from the bad foods that's not bringing anything but empty calories. You made a promise to yourself that you're going to put your morning weights and track and win every day. Everybody wants to win the state championship, right? But how many is going to win every day to get themselves in a situation where they can compete for that state championship?
One of the things that I love about, this discussion, we often hear, and you're talking about daily routine and time management. And I always try to tell parents when we're working with them, the key word in the whole discussion of the process is time. Mm-hmm. Because if you're a senior in high school, well, we don't have a lot of time. If we're 12 and 13, well, now we know we have a lot of time that we can figure out and make it an individual. So there's so many, whether it's strength programs or athletic programs or training topics. And we need to understand that all bodies are different, ages and stages of growth, of maturation, both mentally and physically. And one of the great things that I feel that the process is going to allow families and athletes is individual approach that can best help and benefit them as individuals, as opposed to trying to spread, here's one thing to do and everybody goes and does it. Well, that's not going to work for everybody. Yeah. It might work for some. So talk a little bit about your approach is really unique with regard to the attention to the individual as opposed to a large mass or a large group of athletes.
Yeah, I mean, everything I do is custom. Every athlete, some athletes, we've talked about this, they're bloom early, some of them are bloom late. I'm working with the boy right now that he's a sophomore and he should be a freshman. And I started with him this summer. He was 140. He's 165 now. He's 5'8", but his dad is 6'5". He don't have one uncle on either side of the family. It's not at least 6'3". So we're building a program with him, giving him plenty of nutrition, knowing what's about to come for him of a big growth, linear height increase. And so like his dad was saying, can we put more weight on him right now? I'm like, no, we're just going to keep with this 1 pound a week. When, I'd upped this protein a little bit the other day. We're going to just keep monitoring this. But the minute that this really kicks in, is linear height, then we've got to be on top of it like tomorrow, because we're going to get about a 400 or 500 calorie increase. We're going to really pour the nutrition on. And that's something that I've tried to do really good. And that's why it's important for me to have these weekly numbers back from these athletes, is because I can look, I build them a profile. And I have a target date over here on this profile, and I look at these weekly numbers and see how their body is adjusting to the calorie intake. And then I know what we're shooting for, but we also look at their linear height. I ask the mom and dad what their heights are on all the families, so everything that we are doing is a custom plan for each individual athlete to know this is where we want to be, but we have to take different approaches and different routes depending on their puberty level, depending on their workout program, depending on if they're a pitcher. We don't want to lose no mobility, so I really take my time on putting weights on pitchers depending on their age, because I don't want excess body fat. I want to keep that mobility. So everything with pitchers also, I have higher fat intake that I always want them to be able to take. Their fats will be, 10% or so higher, because a lot of people know that fats increase their testosterone levels and help with brain development. But fats also are really good for your joints. And as a pitcher, we want to have healthy joints. So depending on the position of the player, depending on their puberty, depending on what we're needing to accomplish by what point, everything is always individually per that athlete.
Well, I am really excited. This is our first episode of the process. I want families and athletes to know that this is going to be an ongoing discussion. Each week, we're going to be able to talk different discussion points that really are not heard enough with regard to the younger athletes prior to them getting into high school or prior to them getting into college, when it matters most. You can't play catch up with your nutrition or your weight or anything along those lines. And Jeremy, I really am excited about this endeavor in this podcast. I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation on a weekly basis with you.
Absolutely, Walter. I mean, I know we can bring a lot of value to some families, and that's what I'm excited about.
Well, I think it's really exciting is whether you're in US, Canada, wherever you may be, you're going to have access to both of us, primarily to Jeremy. And, I want to ask you, Jeremy, how do people reach out to you when they are listening to the podcast and say, wow, that's what we need? How are they going to reach you?
Yeah, they can definitely find me on social, whether it be on X or Instagram or TikTok, but probably the easiest way is jeremy@corvive.com. Just send me an email. I'll respond pretty quickly and help those athletes. And, some of them, it depends on where they are. They might just need simple wins. They might need some breakfast ideas, because most of my athletes don't like breakfast. Some of them might need, a good calorie, high protein calorie shake at night recipe, and you can find all that on my social. But for those athletes that's really ready for dialing in their one-on-one nutrition plan, I can help them with that also.
Well, looking forward to our next episode. And Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Walter. Appreciate it.
All proteins are not the same. I encourage you to choose a grass-fed whey protein. The cattle have a cleaner diet, grazing on natural grass, which is going to mean that it's going to have higher branched chain amino acids, also your omegas and your CLAs. I'm telling you, it matters from a recovery standpoint. Choose the best protein and you're going to see the best gains and the best recovery. I'm telling you, athletes, make a wise choice, because it matters what you put in your